All right, imagine waking up one day and your entire city has just lost its grip on reality. Welcome to this historical explainer covering the 1518 dancing plague. I know it sounds like something straight out of a dark fairy tale or some weird work of fiction, but it was absolutely real. And honestly, digging into this event gives us such an incredible window into mass psychology, societal breaking points, and just pure historical terror. We're going to walk through this step by step to really understand how a community could completely surrender to something so uncontrollable. So let's set the scene before the chaos actually hits. Picture medieval city streets at night. The air is super thick. You've got this heavy fog clinging to the cobblestones and the damp brick walls, and the only light comes from the faint, flickering glow of people quietly walking with candles. The atmosphere is just deeply creepy and dripping with this quiet tension. We really need to ground ourselves right here in this eerie, fog-drenched night before the horror truly begins. It's quiet, it's ordinary, but it is literally about to be shattered. Act 1, a solitary spark. You know, every massive, history-altering event usually starts with a single trigger. And in 1518, that spark was entirely solitary, totally unexpected, and incredibly profound. It begins with just one woman. She steps out into the street and suddenly starts dancing, completely alone. Now, she's wearing typical medieval clothing. At first glance, there's nothing physically unusual about her being there. But her face, it tells a completely different story. She has this strange, deeply unsettling expression. It's definitely not joy or celebration. It's something else entirely. And all around her, the villagers are watching in growing fear and sheer confusion. I mean, they are watching their neighbor inexplicably lose her mind, and nobody has a single clue why. Which brings us to Act 2, the uncontrollable contagion. Because, of course, it doesn't stop with her. This bizarre anomaly rapidly escalates into an urgent, highly chaotic mass hysteria, and the momentum builds exponentially. Minute 1, it's just that lone woman in the street. But skip ahead just a few hours. More people are joining the dance. And here is the terrifying part. They aren't choosing to join in. They're doing it uncontrollably. The emotional tension in the city is just skyrocketing as full-blown panic sets in. Fast forward a few days later, and it's absolute, unmitigated chaos. Entire crowds are dancing day and night, completely unable to stop themselves. Just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. And imagine the sheer terror of that situation. Your body is moving relentlessly, day and night, and you have zero bodily autonomy. The physical toll here is absolutely horrifying. The faces of the afflicted are deeply exhausted, looking almost like they're trapped in this slow-motion cycle of suffering. Eventually, people are literally collapsing onto the cobblestones from sheer physical exhaustion. They are dancing themselves into the ground, completely surrounded by this dark, haunting atmosphere that offers absolutely no relief. Moving into Act 3, faith, medicine, and panic. When something completely defies logic and reason, society instinctively leans on its traditional pillars of authority, right? In 1518, that meant faith and medicine. But when those pillars fail to hold up the weight of the tragedy, utter panic takes over. For the uninfected citizens, daily life basically becomes a waking nightmare. You have church bells ringing constantly, which is this relentless, driving auditory reminder of the crisis in the streets. Frightened citizens are desperately praying, just begging for an end to the madness. It's a total state of medieval panic. The people who aren't dancing are essentially held hostage by the situation. They're forced to just watch their community succumb to this invisible force. So naturally, the authorities desperately try to step in and regain control. You've got the doctors attempting to stop the dancers using these mysterious, archaic medical treatments, basically hunting for a physical cause for an inexplicable symptom. Meanwhile, the priests are attempting their own desperate spiritual interventions, treating this mass hysteria as a sickness of the soul. Yet even in the face of this bizarre contagion, both science and spirit utterly fail to stop the momentum. Deconstructing the nightmare. The cinematic style. Let's take a quick step back and look at how a 16th century tragedy like this is visually brought back to life so we can truly feel the weight of it. Using modern documentary techniques is a real game changer here. With ultra-realistic 4K resolution, deep shadows, and dramatic lighting, the sheer horror of the event is massively magnified. The depth of field and motion blur perfectly mimic the dizzying, non-stop exhaustion of the dancers. And when you couple those intense visuals with a swelling orchestral horror score to really drive the emotional storytelling, it makes the historical descent into madness feel incredibly visceral. It literally pulls you across the centuries and drops you straight into the terror of 1518. And finally, Act 4, the haunting aftermath. You know, all plagues, no matter how severe or inexplicable, eventually break. When the manic energy finally drained out of the city entirely, it left behind this profound void. The chaotic, relentless movement of the crowds is violently replaced by, well, nothing. We return to those empty, dark streets, once again covered in a thick layer of fog. But this time, it's defined by an eerie, terrifying dead silence. The contrast between the loud, manic energy of the screaming, exhausted dancers and this hollow aftermath is chilling. Honestly, the silence is almost louder than the church bells were. The city is profoundly scarred by what it just endured, completely changed by a trauma it still doesn't even understand. So what does this all mean? It leaves us with a highly provocative question that still haunts historians, sociologists, and psychologists to this very day. What exactly causes a human mind to entirely lose control of its own body? As you picture those final, slow-moving, shadowy dancers fading out into the darkness of history, I really want you to sit with that thought for a second. The dancing plague of 1518 isn't just some quirky historical footnote. It is a terrifying reminder of the fragility of human psychology and the deep mysteries that are still locked inside our own minds. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning everything.